I've never seen my leaders, but I know they're not for me. I've never seen a real leader posing on TV. A real leader doesn't dance or prance in a parade against themselves. A leader prints and presses and makes of me a reader. I see a lot of guesses, but I don't see any leaders. Today I woke up and I felt rather like revolutionary, so I was like, I'm going to write a poem for the streets.
Wow, I like that poem a lot. It's very rousing, some may say.
Thank you. I would say that, but I thought it'd be a good lead into our first question of the day, which is, what does degrown governance look like? Because I figured we'd be talking a lot about big concepts, definitions, structures, visions, but I wanted to keep central the idea that a government is mostly defined by the people in it. So even in a system which is maybe conceptually more exploitative or less efficient than another one, if it has more virtuous, noble, selfless, intelligent leaders in the government, then it will produce better results, better governance.
Certainly. We sometimes look at government as just a mass.
Exactly.
That has no face and is not made up of individuals like ourselves. So that is a good preface to the conversation. Degrowth is a theory which I feel like government conversations is central to. It's a highly economic theory, but government probably is second to that, because we're trying to imagine a future with almost an entirely different governing structure from what we're used to.
Sure.
That's how I would phrase it. So do you want to tell me, what does degrown government look like to you?
Okay, well, I started off by trying to define governance.
Good place to start.
We've defined degrowth in other episodes, so I won't go over that. But to define governance, when you Google it, it comes up with the National Geographic definition.
I like that.
Which is the role of government is creating and enforcing the rules of a society, defense, foreign affairs, the economy, and public services. Okay, that seems pretty inclusive, pretty much how I would define it, just by looking around us. Something that bothers me is that we don't get these words defined to us, or these concepts defined to us properly in school. Let's say government, let's say economics, let's say even education. They're just defined implicitly by saying, oh, government, you want to know what government is? That's what we have. Yeah. And so in that way, we never learn of anything outside of it. Because it's kind of like when kids in an abusive household grow up, they never know that wasn't normal. So I feel like that's what education, that's how it defines government to us.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know of government other than a parliament in a democracy, in a big country. That's all we know, because that's all we've ever experienced and been taught.
Yeah, the different levels, federal, municipal, provincial, at least in Canada, and the balances that each one of those has. Other definitions I found were one I liked: to take collective action to better the lives of the population it serves.
I like that as well.
Kind of an optimistic definition, I would say. Or an idealistic one.
It's a bit more of a mission statement than anything.
Well, that's what definitions should be, though, for an organization.
Yeah.
And this quote I found from C.S. Lewis, he said, "It is easy to think the state has a lot of different objects, military, political, economic, and whatnot. But in a way, things are much simpler than that. The state exists simply to promote and to protect the ordinary happiness of human beings in this life. A husband and wife chatting over a fire, a couple of friends having a game of darts in a pub, a man reading a book in his own room or digging in his own garden. That is what the state is there for. And unless they are helping to increase and prolong such moments, all the laws, parliaments, armies, courts, police, economics, etc. are simply a waste of time." So it's kind of a longer elucidation of the quote, of the definition I just said, which is to take collective action to better the lives of the population it serves. But C.S. Lewis is obviously very good at composing these images that make it seem so much more vivid. And that is what a government should be for, those moments, preserving those moments.
Yeah, the other day you were playing chess and you said, you have to remember the point is to capture the king.
Yes, exactly.
And I feel like with politics and government, it's like, you have to remember the point is to just help people. But we get caught up in, what's this policy? How's that going to interact with all these different things?
And especially the infighting. We get caught up in the partisanship.
Yeah,
so
you
forget to try and capture the king, to even try.
Yeah. Degrown government to me is kind of what you said, just a government whose aim it is to help people. But when we say government, we don't mean Parliament Hill, like we're Canadian, so it's like we don't mean Parliament Hill, or for me, that's not what I mean when I'm talking about degrowth. I'm talking about basically community leadership and governance that way of we want to govern ourselves. Democracy and degrowth are inseparable in my eyes. There's probably two camps within degrowth, in my opinion. There's like the anarchists and there's the people who really are into a bit more structure.
Yeah.
It can work both ways, like in different places, because degrowth, the government's not going to be the same across the world.
Yeah,
because
let me just define those two camps within the degrowth that you said. So we said, like, what does degrown governance look like? So we're kind of leaning on the existing ideas for this to answer this question, I suppose. I mean, of course, we're going to answer it ourselves, but in terms of what degrowth acolytes think government should look like is kind of what we're answering. So one vision that I found from the website, which fits into the more anarchist camp that you mentioned, this is a quote from degrowth.org, 100% decentralized, autonomous, convivial communities of people consuming no more than they need, sharing as much as possible, treating each other with compassion, fairness, respect, no central state power, no police, no borders, no masters and servants, no conspicuous consumption, no oppression. And when we were talking about that quote earlier this morning, we said that's basically the Shire from Lord of the Rings. So that's like the one vision. And then the other vision, I don't have a quote for it, but you said more structure. Basically what we're talking about is a bigger government who can stop corporations from doing what they're doing and growing as they're growing.
Yes.
And therefore kind of degrowing like that.
Yeah, so those would probably look like really, really pure democracies. There's never going to be a completely pure democracy, but a lot more people are able to vote and participate. The voters are informed. You know the politicians is kind of like a key to it, the people who are representing you to defend your community against the big corporations or against people who are looking to exploit your community or the people around you. Degrown government, to me, looks a lot more horizontal than it is right now.
Okay.
Right now, I feel like you could never access Trudeau.
Yeah, Justin Trudeau. That's why the first line of my poem was, "I've never seen my leaders."
Yeah,
It's
but
like,
if it was
that's
horizontal,
crazy.
it's like you would know the people helping make the decisions. You'd be helping make the decisions, and the governance would be. It's referred to by one philosopher as inclusive democracy. So right now we look at democracy and we just think of politics, like political democracy. But there's also economic, social, and ecological democracy.
Of course,
Which right now it's like we vote in the politicians, but then from there, like we don't have a say in economic policy and environmental regulations. Like they make all those decisions.
Because of course it's more efficient. It's too, with the size of countries as they are, you can't have a referendum for every economic decision or ecological decision that we want to make.
Exactly. But the thing is, in such a large country, an ecological decision in Alberta isn't going to impact us in Nova Scotia that much. So it's like, shouldn't you consult the Albertans? And then if you're making a decision in like the Montreal
So you're saying
area,
more decentralized power.
Yeah.
More provincial and even city mayoral power.
Yeah, and like breaking down the barriers that we have to those consultations right now, because I'm sure there's consultations held in our cities, but no one feels like they're going to be heard if they go to them. It might be inaccessible because it's like we work 40 or more hours a week, so it's like, why would I want to go spend like 3 hours at this drawn out bureaucratic?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a distrust anyway.
Yeah.
Like, why would I go there? They don't care what I have to say.
Exactly. So that's like, these are all barriers to democracy and to, in my opinion, what I think a degrown government should look like. Because we should just feel like our voices matter. Because that's, I feel like, the big lie that we've been told, the construct which is stopping us from getting anything done.
Definitely. I mentioned the big countries there. I'm of the opinion that countries are generally just too big, especially Canada and the USA. Like when they're that big, for instance, people in America, I feel, would identify more as a New Yorker or a Californian or a Texan than they do as even as an American. Like the local identity comes first and foremost. And I always say, what makes someone in British Columbia in Canada and someone in Nova Scotia share a nationality? Because the landmass is so huge and the cultures from coast to coast are wildly different. I think some things being centralized makes a lot of sense, but when it comes to governance, the main thing I don't like is this word mess.
Mm-hmm.
Mass surveillance, mass consumerism. It always, I find, detracts from the idea of the individual agency. And an example I had is why are curriculums mandated?
Mm-hmm.
Why should governments, taking any of the three definitions that I said at the start, actually, the National Geographic one, the C.S. Lewis quote, or the one that says to take collective action to better the lives of the population it serves, why would a government-mandated curriculum for public education, how does that do those things? That's not about bettering lives at that point, I think.
What I think their thinking would be, well, we want everyone to get a good, equal education. If you live in Canada, you should learn these basic things. But it doesn't make sense to, like, to be learning about, like, there'd be specialized things that would make a lot more sense if you live in a fishing village versus if you live in a big city.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course there's that. There's the localization. I'm not talking so much about the fact that the curriculum is the same across the country. It's the fact that it's mandated that I don't like.
Okay.
You know, the teachers don't get to choose what they teach at all. At which point, I don't know how accurate the word teacher can even be, unfortunately for them.
No, that's, okay, I see what you mean. That certainly makes sense. Teachers should have a lot more empowerment and liberty to use techniques perhaps that they prefer. Like, I know a teacher she's doing a degree right now in outdoor education, and it's a thing, like, you can get the degree in Canada, but it's impossible to, like, use the degree because it's not integrated into the curriculum right now. So you'd have to either, like, sneak it into her classes in, like, little ways. Like, there's no, like, outdoor education class that she could actually teach because it's not an option.
So I mentioned, and I think you agree, some things that aren't right now should be decentralized. Some things that aren't right now should be centralized, or the federal state should have a bit more power, or at least act with a bit more teeth than it currently does.
Yeah.
I think we're going to agree that it's regulation of environmental acts through corporations and economic ones too. I always thought when Disney acquired Fox, I was like, well, that shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have happened. Things like that.
I was looking into some examples of when the government did intervene to stop things.
And taxation, of course.
Yeah. Certainly. Because Social Security is important no matter what size, how like convivial we're living. There's always going to be people who get sick or who there's something like tragic happens. You're going to need intervention from some type of organizing power. And the thing is, like, even if we all shrunk our communities down to the Shire, we'd still need to interact because you can't grow the same foods. Like, you can't grow, like, basic things, really, in some parts of the country or some parts of the world. So, like, there's still going to be trade and there's still going to be
supply lines, of course, yeah.
But it needs to be governed because I feel like if we said, okay, tomorrow we're waking up, everyone's living in the Shire, we'd get back to where we are today in, like,
very
100
quickly.
or 200 years.
Yep.
Because it'd be like, well, then this one Shire, they're sitting on a gold mine, so they're going to become the rich Shire, and then everything's going to...
Or everyone's going to go there for gold, and there's going to be a war or something like that.
I was talking with someone the other day about, like, communes and how governance works in those, because I don't know anyone who's lived in a commune, but there are quite a few across Canada, I believe, of, like, different levels of...
Autonomy.
Yeah, of autonomy. And she knew someone who lived in a commune and said it was really good. It was a commune of, like, people who were new to Canada, so they immigrated from, like, all over the world. And they shared, like, repairs. They all had, like, very similar houses. They all worked just normal jobs, but then would, like, kind of pool their money. And she said it was really great and an awesome sense of community for this person that she knew. But then, for example, it was like, if you wanted to make a change to the inside of your house, like, it would have to be approved. And oftentimes it wouldn't be approved.
Yeah.
Because it would, like, make your house look nicer than your neighbors. And, like, that seems, like, too extreme.
Well, yeah, like in the suburbs. Like in
Yeah.
Christmas with the Cranks.
Exactly.
And that's what I liked about the C.S. Lewis quote. It was a very kind of idealistic quote about the vision of the state and its role in life. But he was still espousing private ownership. A man reading a book in his own room or digging in his own garden. That was part of his vision. And yet he, of course, was not against things like community camaraderie, collaboration, helping one another,
Yeah.
taxation. And I think this kind of is a good lead into the next question. You don't need to live in a commune for all the good things you just mentioned to happen.
And also, we've gone so far that like everything's privatized almost. Even knowledge is privatized. Like you can't access certain information and data without paying or having some kind of a barrier taken down. So it's like somewhere between complete privatization and complete community ownership. We just need some of our commons back would be an awesome place to start, I think. And as you said, this is a good transition into our next question, which is...
The next question is the pros and cons of the UBI, the Universal Basic Income. I don't have a lot to say on this because when I tried to research it, there's not a lot of research on it. So it was barely enough for me to form an opinion. The only opinion I could really form was, no, there's not enough research on it. So I would be against it in most cases. The clamor for a UBI has obviously sprung up in these very specific late-stage capitalist American working class conditions. Minimum wage isn't giving us enough money to pay rent, support our families, healthcare, pay taxes, pay for our cars, enjoy life, or live life, etc. And this is leading to healthcare crises, drug addiction, general malaise. I understand this. And I understand why it's such an appeal to people.
Yeah, certainly.
But, okay, this is a weird comparison, but it reminds me of when I hear about extremist religious groups who recruit people who are just in the mud. Because, there's the deity, and so they're very, I won't say gullible, but everyone's so desperate to believe in something and to cling on to something and say, this will be the savior. And the UBI is so understandable. Well, we'll all get money.
Yeah, and you can literally, you can think about it. If you were given an extra $1,000 a month, I know exactly what I'd do with it. And so does, I think, most people.
Yeah, but my issue is, being not an economist, it seems like these large-scale studies or even projections, even models, haven't really been done to, I would say, an acceptable level to trial something, is that you don't know the long-term ramifications on an economy of something like this. Or on a culture, but just speaking economically, because it's an economic proposition, I'm not sure about it. And there are things which do fall into the category of welfare or social security, which have been proven to work.
Yes.
And which I even think will be more of an easy sell. So I feel like the UBI is overlooking things which are maybe more practical, efficient, proven.
Yeah.
Like
free healthcare,
parks,
universal housing,
education,
food. But the thing is, basically what a UBI purports to do is, okay, everyone's going to be able to afford housing, food, healthcare, kind of proactive healthcare especially, and therefore healthcare costs will go down because everyone's able to eat.
Yeah, police costs will go down.
Yeah, because everyone will. But when you think about it, investing those money in those specific institutions, in my opinion, seems like it'd be a bit more helpful. Because as we always look to Sweden and Finland.
The Nordic model.
Not
socialism, though. Socialized capitalism.
Yeah.
The social democrats.
My favorite example from those countries is they decided, hey, let's build nice houses and let everyone have a nice house. And then obviously there was no homelessness. And then if you have a house to shower in, to prepare food in, you can get a job much easier. Because if you're trying to get a job from nothing or you're struggling to make ends meet to pay rent, you're not going to be able to get a job that you like and feel empowered in. That's my favorite solution that I feel like is just would be an easy sell. But the thing about the UBI is that everyone gets it. So it's an easy sell to people who make $100K a year, honestly. Because it's well, I can invest that in my GME stocks or what have you. Another couple pros that I saw for UBI, which honestly made sense to me, is that I would encourage a higher minimum wage. Because one of the cons people always say is, well, no one's going to be motivated to work. But it's you have to have it kind of at this at this level where it's like you're not giving everyone $5,000 a month. You're giving everyone like a few, like enough to pay rent and food and so on, like to meet your basic needs. But then minimum wage would have to be higher to attract people and retain people. And right now, I feel like minimum wage is so artificially low to try and keep commodity prices low that no one's able to survive off it and have to have multiple jobs or like many incomes for a home. And it pays care workers or like unpaid workers. Because right now, at least in my community, I knew so many people who they had to quit their job to take care of their like elderly parent or their child, or they
are a mother.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they deserve to receive money, in my opinion, mainly because of the way minimum wages, because you used to have one income households were like the norm, but now it's like you need two incomes basically, for the most part, in order to run a household with children in it. I feel like allowing stay-at-home parents would be so valuable to a society. Imagine how
Of course. That's an investment that society needs to make, right?
Yeah,
much like university education.
Mm-hmm.
It's better in the long run to subsidize that.
Yeah.
So that you have university-educated
Yes.
graduates.
But we
being a
forget
majority.
that. We're like, well, what's the value of a stay-at-home parent? It's like the kids are going to be so empowered and cared for, and they're going to be great members of society someday. Yeah, we forget about it.
Well, it's kind of like that thing. We forget that the aim is to capture the king.
Yeah.
It's like the aim of society is to always be better generation by generation, so that each new kid that's born has a better life than their parents. That's the main goal. It's like humanity's relay. Like that is the overarching millions of years. Like that's the goal, is to always be improving.
Exactly.
So when people say, "Oh, well, why would we subsidize stay-at-home parents? What's the good in that?" It's like, well, that is the good.
Yes, exactly. And we lose sight of it when you're going to work and you're in Willy Wonka and you're making toothpaste caps all day. You're like, well, this is the real work. This is what's important, is toothpaste caps.
But what's really important is you come home, get to make your little factory out of the toothpaste caps.
Yep.
With your boy. With your boy Charlie. The references are flowing today.
Yeah, they sure are.
One of my favorite, this is completely off topic, but one of my favorite internet memes is how everyone hates Grandpa Joe. Is that his name?
I didn't know everyone hates
Everyone
Grandpa
hates
Joe.
him because he pretends to be bedridden, and then when they get the ticket to the factory, suddenly he's up and dancing, jumps out of bed, starts tap dancing all over the place, and everyone's like, Grandpa Joe, and he goes, I'm healed, or whatever was even wrong with him, just being old and sad, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe it's some kind of metaphor. Maybe that's what the UBI would do. I don't know. Are you for or against? I'll say personally, I'm against it. I think the efforts, the political cachet, is that what you say?
I think so.
Like your political standing and all that work and enthusiasm should be into improving everything else which is proven to work. And then, things are still messed up. Let's consider UBI. I think it should go like that.
Yeah.
For instance, how are taxes even being spent now? Fix that before we work on taxing the rich, I would say.
Yeah, because I feel like for a UBI to work, it's like the healthcare system has to work. Right now, no matter how much money you have, well, I'm speaking in Canada, I know it's much different in the States, but it's like healthcare is still free for everyone. It's kind of messed up for almost everyone. Like $1,000 a month isn't going to help you afford a doctor in Canada. Like doctors in Canada are hard to get, basically. And
depending on where you live, for sure.
Yeah, so I think UBI to a degree I would be for. But I think it's like, it doesn't need to be universal. It could be like everyone who makes under a certain amount a year. Because it's like, there is certainly a point where it would just be invested in stocks or invested in pretty frivolous things. But I think it would be incredibly useful for someone without a job. But we have that, like it's unemployment.
Right.
So I think it's hard to say. I'm kind of for it. But like I think you just feel like there's a lot of alternatives as well, which might just take more effort.
Or more imagination. Like this is such an easy sell.
Yeah.
It's 3 letters. Everyone can just kind of shout that.
Yeah.
It's like there are things which aren't so concise and tweetable and hashtagable, which might work just as well or better and proven.
Yeah, and UBI isn't going to change the imaginary of the population. People aren't all of a sudden going to be like, we love stay-at-home parents. We love artists. We love
That's a good point.
the people who are sweeping the streets. Like, no one's really going to, it's not going to change the mindset.
That kind of dynamic. And also, just going back to the degrown governance, we didn't touch on law.
Oh, we didn't touch on law.
Which is an important branch of government.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that law should have sustainability as a central motive.
Yeah, of course.
Ecological and also social sustainability. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if this means giving trees rights. I don't think so, because I don't think trees have rights in the way that we consider humans to have rights. And also because, as I consider myself something of an environmental pragmatist, there's a certain amount of pollution and degradation which everyone is fine with. Like, no one's going to say you can't emit any greenhouse gases ever because the earth can handle some.
Yeah.
So there is some amount of trees that can be cut down always, and water that can be polluted and air that can be polluted always, which is sustainably done. So that's why I don't think trees should have rights. But I don't know how legally it would matter. But there should be more laws, of course, protecting natural capital.
Yeah.
And specifically, government should have more teeth to enforce these regulations. I think you mentioned like the two camps of degrowth visions. There's also kind of this paradox, which I think is actually the biggest camp, somewhere between them, where we need really big government to make change so that we don't need really big government.
Yeah, that's literally the introductory statement of how degrowth was introduced to me was exactly that. It said, a government that gets so big that it can disappear.
Oh yeah,
that's how like the teacher presented it.
It's a much catchier way of saying it.
I was like, yeah, that's what I'm up for. Because it's like, I feel like in a perfect society, I'd love an anarchy. I'd be like, this is so great. Everyone's just like vibing. But it's like, I'm going to make this firm statement that it's impossible for that to exist within our lifetimes for sure. And maybe ever because of
human nature.
Yeah. I think the thing with laws and giving streams and things rights is I think streams should have rights, but also I know there's been a few class action lawsuits, which is like a group of people suing a corporation or like appealing to the government to actually enforce the laws because the government so frequently just will not enforce their laws.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's often like the government.
That's why I started by mentioning the individuals matter a lot. Like who is voted in matters more than the system, because even if you have this idealistic, these laws, let's say, if there's rampant corruption, nothing good is ever going to happen.
Yeah. But
so we need to somehow get better at electing good people. And I know that's not a hot take, and I haven't really thought about how. Maybe that should be a question for next week.
Yeah.
How can we reward good politicians and good ideas?
Yeah, certainly.
Something like that. And kindness.
Yeah. But, sorry, I'm going to finish my statement as well. The class action lawsuits were on behalf of future generations.
Yep.
Which I think is like a key part of future governance is like, that's what sustainability is, considering the next generation and 3 generations down the line, because we don't do that.
But yeah, it shouldn't be some really creative loophole that you have to find in the law. Oh, actually, this is on behalf of the future generations. Gotcha. Yeah. It shouldn't have to be like that. It should be It should be baked into the law. Sustainability.
And the law should just be it should just be enforced. I don't know, it's frustrating. I went to one hearing once and I was like, you're suing, it was the government versus a government department and then there was another party, which was like the lawyers who were saying, your government department is breaking its own laws. Can you like stop that? And they were like, well, I don't know. They're just hurting these species. And it was wild. I don't know. Definitely baking sustainability into law. Because right now it's like, I feel like a lot of the laws are kind of frivolous. They're probably mainly car related, or mainly the laws that we know. So get rid of cars. It'll free up some slots for
there's
for
not
new
like
laws.
a finite number of laws though.
No, I know, I'm just joking.
We go through this whole episode and you think it's like that.
There's 100 laws.
You say, well, if we had these laws, but what about these other ones?
Well, there's 10 commandments. We're going to have to count one in order to make space for another one, you know?
Okay.
Sorry, getting a little bit off topic. And speaking of off topic, do you want to know the species of the week?
You mean the organism of the week?
The organism of the week. It is the Moringa.
Okay.
Can you guess what a Moringa is?
An animal.
Nope.
Tree.
Tree, yeah. So a Moringa, aka the drumstick tree,
Ooh.
is the most nutrient-dense plant on the planet.
Whoa.
So it's like a superfood.
Oh, you can eat it?
Yeah.
Okay. You
Yeah.
can eat the tree.
Yeah, because I was thinking about degrown futures and like community gardens and food sovereignty, which I was going to talk about today, but then I didn't. Maybe I'll get to it
That's
later.
like our podcast motto or catchphrase.
Yeah. I was thinking about food sovereignty a lot, which maybe I'll talk about next week. Maybe that can be what's food sovereignty? A good question. And I was like, what's important is eating nutrient-dense food, because sometimes in a day I'll eat a full pack of rice cakes, and it's like, this was inefficient.
That's your grandma snack.
Yeah, grandma now. You called it a mom snack before. Anyway.
You're aging.
Moringa.
I always see these TikToks which are there are X number of edible plants on Earth. They're like 150 million or like some crazy big number, and we only eat 3 of them. Or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, we should probably eat more.
Yeah, exactly. So this lovely plant, it's a flowering tree. There's 13 species. So Moringa is the genus, and then there's 13 species, and it's tropical / subtropical. And I'll show you 2 pictures, okay?
Okay.
This is my favorite one of the trees. All the other ones kind of look like cartoon trees, but then this is one of them.
Oh, wow. Okay. It looks like there are trees like that in Donkey Kong.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a really chunky bottom, like a radish, and it narrows towards the top. These grow in Africa, right?
Yes.
Into the green leaves.
Wait, I believe they do. They look really similar to ones that you'd see on like
A safari.
a safari.
Yeah.
Typical. And these are the plants. These are the fruits.
Okay.
That's why they're called drumstick trees.
Yeah, they look like really long green beans.
Yeah, green drumsticks. So, pretty cool. You can eat all parts of the plant, the root, the leaves, the bark.
I think we should eat more roots, but I'll talk about that next week in our food episode.
Yeah. All right, is next week a food episode?
Well, you said we're going to talk about food sovereignty,
Yeah,
so
we
I
are.
said we're going to
Never
talk about food.
Sorry. So yeah, that's the organism of the week, folks. My first stab at it. Hopefully you enjoyed. Okay.
Next time we should do that as if you're coming up for like poetry.
Yeah. So today I'm presenting the Moringa.
Yeah, exactly.
Moringa. Where are your trees?
Okay, let's get into the third question of the day, which is, how does commodification impact the autonomy of individuals? Commodification, 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 the transformation of goods, services, ideas, nature, personal information, or people into commodities or objects of trade. That's a definition from Wikipedia.
Excellent.
Which is really the only one that matters. I'm not even joking.
Yeah. Wikipedia is a commons.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tended by its users.
Mm-hmm. If the definition isn't democratic like that, what's even the point of it?
What's the point? So, commodification, my arch nemesis besides cars. Really a lot of words start with C. Cucumbers,
Another C word, Kanye. I have a quote from him, or just Ye now, actually. I was listening to an interview that he gave a few days ago, and I thought this quote was relevant about commodification. He said, "We used to have water fountains. Now there's a plastic problem from all the water bottles," which I think is just a really good illustration of what's gone wrong. It's like there used to just be fountains in the ancient world.
Yeah, exactly. In the not-so-ancient world. But now if you want water, like you literally have to buy it for the most part. Because even if there's a water fountain, it's usually full of sludge. Or it's just gross, because no one takes care of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, they should be stone.
Yeah. Isn't there, in Italy, I believe, there's water fountains, and it's, free water, but then there's,
Sparkling water that you have to pay a little bit for.
Yeah.
But still not a lot. Yeah. Those are all over the place.
That's so crazy to me. And it's not they're new. They're just ancient.
They're very old, yeah.
Yeah. Commodification, how does it ruin our autonomy?
Well, I had 3 kind of avenues, which are commodification of self, which means self-realization through purchases. I'm not cool unless I buy the clothes that make me look
Yeah.
cool, like that basically. Commodification of autonomy. We've mentioned this in previous episodes. Wall-E. Another good example is just adults today who say they can't cook.
Yeah, it's like competence.
Yeah, of course. This is also a problem with parenting, but I mean, if you can't cook, it probably means you've been relying on too many restaurants, fast foods, or what are they called? Microwave meals.
Yeah, it's not our fault.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
It isn't the fault of the people in Wall-E.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their fault, it's their ancestors' fault.
Mm-hmm.
And commodification of companionship.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how products today fill our void.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say products, I mean most movies, most TV shows, most music, most podcasts, including this one. Not including this one because we don't make any money off of it, but
We don't charge for it.
most things which masquerade as art today aren't art, they're products.
Mm-hmm. I feel like commodification just creates this insanely unstable system because I was thinking about it, and it's like if everyone decided we're going to rebel, we're going to start a revolution, we're going to...
A violent revolution.
Or just a revolution like ones we've seen in the past that aren't violent, but like huge protests, like not buying things. Strikes. The government could say, or not even the government, corporations who would likely be the ones who are being attacked because that's what we don't want. They'd be like, well, we're going to not give you food, so you're going to starve within a week and a half because
no one
you
knows
have
how
no
to farm.
food. This is where I was going to talk about food sovereignty. But no one knows how to farm. And like, even if you knew how, where are you going to farm sufficient food for you and your neighbors?
Most people live in apartments.
Yeah. So that's just like one simple thing. It's like they could just say, we control you. Like the commodities control us. It's like if we decided we're not going to purchase clothes ever again.
Yeah.
But then all of our clothes end up being tattered. It's like we rely on, even if we knew how to loom fabric, it's like we would still need access to the sheep or the cotton or what have you.
Yeah, all the specialized loom parts you have to buy off Amazon.
Yeah.
Like the loom bands.
Yeah.
I think this is why there's such a romance today about going off the grid.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like generationally it used to be, can't wait till I retire and I can go fishing and go on my boat all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, if I got enough money, I would just be able to take care of myself. Like that's the goal. I wouldn't have to rely on these power companies, for instance. I'd have solar panels of my own.
Yes.
Things like that.
Exactly. So that's how commodification, I feel like, ruins our autonomy. It's like we can't access most things without purchasing it. And that goes as far as mainly, like, leisure is a big part of it. It's like we can't relax without spending money. That's as basic as buying a book, as paying your Netflix subscription, paying your internet bills. And that's one of the most dangerous parts of commodification in my mind, because leisure in particular, everyone used to be kind of alienated at work. You'd still like kind of, it sucked, it was hard. But then when you'd go to relax, you'd go to the theater. You would go play soccer like behind your workplace.
Yeah,
like,
or you'd have a barbecue. You'd hang out with your neighbors, something like that. That's why I mean like companionship has been commodified.
Mm-hmm. It's like we just go and be alone. That's how we entertain ourselves.
Or we hang on Discord or Reddit or Facebook or Instagram, and then those go down and people are like, oh, what? Like I remember when WhatsApp went down a few weeks ago or a couple months ago.
Yeah.
It was a meltdown. And I know WhatsApp is important for a lot of people working, you know, professional communications and things like that. But it just shows our reliance on companies for the most basic of things like communication.
Yeah, the other day, it was the time change, but then 2 weeks in advance, Bell, I think it was Bell, they, for some reason, all of the phones that were on that network went back a week early.
Which is a media
so
company
a bunch
in
of
Canada,
people,
I should say that.
Yeah, and like a telecommunication company, yeah. So a bunch of people just like overslept for an hour. Or got up an hour early, I can't remember, fallbacks. Like, they got up an hour early and they're like, what the? Because their phones had gone back.
Yeah.
So it's like they had...
Because we rely on the alarm.
Yeah. And it's like, we just have very little autonomy. I don't know. It stresses me out. Makes me want to go off the grid. But then you have to remember, we need change. So we have to keep functioning on the grid.
Or you have to remember, I don't know how to go off the grid.
Yeah.
to speak humbly, I don't know how to raise our own food. most of us have never killed an animal or seen an animal being killed.
Yeah.
Even if we're vegetarian, we don't know how to grow it properly. I mean, you can grow everyone has a little herb garden in their apartment, but no one knows how to till the land.
Yeah.
That kind of information is not really taught to us, for one thing.
Yeah, certainly. This is my final commodification thought, is even down to like the most intellectual and creative pursuits have been commodified. Like governments outsource their policymaking to experts. Like they pay people to make the policy and then they approve it or whatever.
Okay.
And it's like creative people will like outsource the design of their products. Like we'll use H&M as an example. Like they outsource their design. Like they pay for it. It's not like there's someone at H&M who's just like passionate about fashion. It's just like everything's outsourced. Everything's a commodity. It's
not art, it's a product.
Yes.
Or what I was saying about the movies.
Exactly. And in a degrown society, art would be art, knowledge would be knowledge, food would be food.
And innovation still exists.
Exactly.
There's still innovation in science. I still think we should explore space, the oceans. We should still be ever trying to improve our understanding of consciousness, the universe. But innovation on the consumer level, or I won't say consumer, on the individual level, should make us smarter and stronger, and also on a collective scale. And right now it weakens us and it makes us dumber.
Yeah.
Like that's where all the, what do they call it? Research and development. That's what all the research and development today is working towards.
Trying to find new commodities to sell to us.
And make us more reliant. Yeah. Like the Pringles. Do you remember when we were reading about Pringles and how scientifically calculated it is to try and make them more addictive? But so that you can't just have one. And people treat it lightly. It's like, oh, Pringles, I can't stop at just one. It's like, yeah, they're...
There was a team that just
exactly.
that made that happen.
all the way down to the feel of it, the crunch, the sound. They didn't do that so that you could have a better experience eating Pringles. They did that so that you would buy more Pringles.
I feel like there's a question here for next week, but I'm not totally sure.
No, yeah, there is.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with it of just like what commodities would remain in a degrown society, or like what things would remain. What things could you buy versus would you just trade and like be a given? I don't think that's phrased well enough, but I'll try and describe what I mean. Of like, I feel like in a degrown society, in my mind, you wouldn't have to pay for food. It's like you might not grow it yourself. But it's like there'd be farmers who would be paid to make the food. A
barter economy, you mean, on a local scale?
A little bit, yeah. And maybe you'd pay for your food, but it would just be like a monthly, it'd be basically a tax. Everyone's taxed $50 and you get food. And I know in like, under communism, when that's been like trialed, that's probably a bad word for it, failed around the world. That was like one of the most brutal parts of it was like you'd have to wait in line for food for 2 or 3 hours.
For your one potato for the week.
Yeah. But it's just like...
I don't really like that idea so much.
I'm trying to... Food would be a bit more of a community thing. I don't know what I mean.
Okay, well, I just think the community thing in general... I remember, I love this quote. I don't remember where it came from, but someone said... Where I come from, I think it was an African person who came from a not very well-off country. They said, where I come from, we don't let our neighbors starve. And this is a very poor country, a very poor community. Because it was a more of a collective and tribe-like mentality, which is just very different from the dog-eat-dog mentality here.
So maybe my question is...
How to grow that, how to build that, how to return to that, maybe.
Yeah, how to like return to community. Also, I think my question was kind of what would the economic system look like in degrowth? Like, what would money be?
What would money be? That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, you had a really crazy idea a few weeks ago. I don't think we mentioned it on the podcast Well, I'll save it for next week. Yeah,
I think that's where my question was going, the answer.
That's an interesting thought.
Teaser.
Yeah,
I had a good idea.
That's the cliffhanger.
For once. Yeah, sorry it took so long to get to that question, but what would the role of money be in a degrown society?
Thanks for listening.
Bye.